And now it is time for this edition of the News Review. In this edition of the News Review, French left-wing union, CGT, has called for more strikes over the government's planned pension reforms after President Emmanuel Macron vowed to press ahead with the overhaul.
Ce qu'il a dit de nouveau.
We need strikes everywhere, in the public and private sectors. This is the only way they can comprehend us.
Philippe Martinez says the unions must, quote, send a stronger warning sign to the government. He added that the new round of talks between the unions and the government will be held on January 7th. Earlier, Macron said that he will push ahead with his pension reform plans despite weeks of protests and strikes across the country. The French president said, however, that he expects the government to compromise with the unions. Macron plans to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, and workers would receive less pension rights if they retire earlier. To discuss that more, we're joined by our correspondent in Paris, Raman Mazahari, and also Mr. Tony Gosselin, investigative journalist who's joining us live from Bristol. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's begin with our correspondent here to get more updates. We were not surprised to see that these strikes had absolutely no effect on Macron in order to overturn that policy. What do you think the next step will be? What's going to happen on January the 7th?
Well, that's going to be the first time that the government has negotiated in about 2.5 weeks. There has been 27 consecutive days of strike, and the government has only sat down with all of the unions for 3 days. So it really shows you that the government has never really been interested in finding a broad solution. What the government has wanted to do is they have wanted to divide and conquer. They wanted to speak with individual unions, individual sectors, and try to buy them off. And that way the strike would be weakened. And that is now starting to work. Just yesterday, the pilots and air cabin union, they called off their strike, which was planned for January 3rd, because they got government. So this is certainly a very, very worrying sign for many French people, but this is exactly the same playbook that we've seen year after year in the age of austerity. So what the government wants to do is they want to buy off some other key sectors such as hospital workers, rail workers, and teachers. And if they can get 2 out of those 3, people are really going to be feeling very, very gutted, and that there is, the strike is going to be broken. It's basically all resting on public transport unions. I mean, that's what this so-called general strike has really come down to, because unions have only called for 3 days of nationwide protests, and tomorrow will mark the 4th week. It will become the longest general strike in French history, but it's really all been on the backs of the public transport workers. January 9th is going to be only the 4th day of nationwide strikes and protests. So what I'm saying is that rail workers, they've been on strike every day and really causing, a lot of transportation headaches. But, even your, politically active, politically conscious
I'm very sorry to cut you off right there, because I need Mr. Gosselin also to give us his point of view, and we're running out of time. Now, what is your opinion? Well, it seems very obvious that Macron is following the divide and rule policy, and it seems to be working, but considering the fact that, this analysis has been outspoken, do you believe that this time around Macron will be successful? How far do you think that the strikes will go, and who are the ones that will actually get what they demand?
Well, look, of course, Macron is using this old colonial tactic, isn't he? This divide and rule, trying to divide up the unions in France and pick them off one by one, bribe them one by one. So this is really a kind of game he's playing here with the futures of the French people, having now, I mean, this is what this is all about, is stealing 2 years of pension from every single public worker in France. And of course, if they can get their act together, they can stop him. I still believe, you know, there has been a lot of organisation behind this, and the main thing is that Macron is definitely on the back foot here. Although, of course, he's in power, he's got really very, very little support from the French people. They've isolated him. Many of his allies have left him on his own on this one. And I think what we're seeing is a ratchet sort of system here where he's trying to push it more and more and more. And of course, he's not operating in the interests of the French people. He's operating in the French elites, super rich interests of the markets, and of course the European markets, the Brussels markets. What he's doing is he's trying to bring France into line with other European countries which have dumbed down their pension system. It's worth mentioning as well that the Yellow Vests, who have also been protesting for a whole year, they have a very strong element of the pensions in their demands. So this is bringing the protesters together, this protest. The Yellow Vests want a 40% increase in social security payments and in pensions. They also want doubling of public services. So there's a very powerful programme for the future of France, which will bring a great deal better quality of life for tens of millions of French people. It's just that Macron is set against that. He's the enemy, in a way, against the whole of the French people. And this is only going to get more interesting as the strike gets longer and longer. Because, by the way, many petrol stations now run out of fuel. There's all sorts of problems which are being caused, which means people just cannot get on with their daily lives anymore because of the longevity of the strike.
I'm very sorry to cut you off. We're running out of time. So in conclusion, if we want to wrap up, it seems that solidarity is the name of the game as far as the French public is concerned, and we're going to have to wait and see how they will carry that on. Thank you very much, Ramin Mazaheri, our correspondent from Paris, and Mr. Tony Gosselin, investigative journalist out of Bristol. Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks to all of our viewers for following this edition of the News Review.